JJ. Thank you, Uncle Chigga Dixon, from the most ancient to the most modern, from awe to marvel. Is there no end to what we can achieve as humans? I'm going to let you know something that most people don't know, that none of you would, which is the techs have put something on my head called a flesh-coloured microphone, right? Which none of you can see. Right? Right. Look. We're hardwired for the transcendent. Actually, that's wrong. I don't even know what that means, right? But you were expecting me because you heard I'm from the Wayside Chapel and I'm a pastor, and you're expecting, when you saw someone with my flesh colour, that I would say something guru-like. But sorry to disappoint. But I know that within all of us lies an urge to do something more, to make a difference in this world. It lies within us all, to strive and to seek and to find higher and faster and stronger. I'm an expert at striving because I'm Asian, right? Within each of us lies this voice that we're told is a divine voice, sounds eerily like our mothers, that says no matter how hard you work, no matter how high you climb, it's not good enough. Right? You can do better. And so I became really good at striving, and I rode that wave all the way up to within just over a year to complete a double degree at one of our nation's finest universities in computer science and engineering, a course that my mother chose for me to do. She stole my preference form the night before and submitted it on my behalf. But I couldn't complete it because I could no longer stifle the question that I had spent so long suppressing within me, which was, what for? Why am I doing this? To what end is all this striving? And so I took a gap year. And I thought, everyone around me is looking after themselves and they're going higher and faster and stronger. So I thought, how about I take a gap year and I go lower, slower and weaker and do something for others for a change. And so pretty quickly I found a group that was working to make a difference in some of our nation's most marginalised communities, working with people who were living with the long-term effects of generational unemployment, working with the people who are suffering from the consequences of long-term effects of abuse and marginalisation and disadvantage. And they didn't do this by setting up wonderful programs, but they did this rather by moving into those communities and renting houses in those neighbourhoods and opening up their doors and using their homes as a place of hospitality. They limited their incomes to live on the same amount of money as someone living on our nation's poverty line. So as much as possible, they could fit in and feel the same pressure that their community was facing. When I heard about them, I thought, they're nuts. Right? I have to give this a go. And so pretty soon I moved in and I joined a house, and we were running a house for men seeking asylum in this country. And then pretty soon up the road, I met a young girl who was taking in women and children fleeing domestic violence into her home, doing amazing things, and we soon fell in love. You could say it was love at first crisis. And what was supposed to be a gap year, much to my mother's disappointment, turned into over 20 years of welcoming people into our home as a place of refuge, as a place of safety for women and fun for children, and then as a part-time men's shed also. You know, there was no night that we didn't have someone in our house through that time. And I could tell you some stories that would make your hair curl. And it's not like there was a punch card where you could clock off at night too. Often there were knocks on the door in the middle of the night and we would have to jump up at a moment's notice. But what kept us going? Well, let me tell you. We were very lucky that early on we got to meet someone who would change our life. We didn't know it at the time, but this 14-year-old girl would change everything for us. She was our very own daughter. We didn't meet her till she was 14. She marched into our house one day with a bunch of her friends. She had bright red hair and she was louder than life and she fit all the stereotypes for a redhead. And she came in. She was a wild spirit too. The first day she wore shoes was when she was 5 years old to go to school. And she grew up in a pretty rough and tumble family. And, they were well known in our community for their dealings. We fell in love with her immediately. Let me explain about how she is our daughter. We have 3 daughters, 2 through love and birth, and 1 through love and tragedy. When we met that little girl, we found out that her big front was covering up a world of hurt and pain within her. Her father had just died from complications due to drug and alcohol use, and the doctors had diagnosed her mother with a similar outlook, and she didn't have long to live. And this tough little girl was covering up all the pain and hurt that she could in the best way she could. And unfortunately, Mum's prognosis got worse and worse, and eventually she died. This little girl, at about 16 years old, was all alone. And it became clear in the lead up to the funeral that the family were dealing with other business and there wasn't a real secure offer of housing for her. And it got to the day of her funeral and 400 of us packed into this little chapel with an open casket, 400 of us sitting around like this and just an open casket and that little girl standing by her mother. And then something happened in that moment. As the casket began to close, everyone sat down, but time suddenly slowed down. And there was a moment when that casket clicked shut, that you could see that little girl was utterly alone in this world. And a huge sob started to make its way through her body, and you could see her doing all she could to fight it down. Every one of the 400 had sat down except me. I'd become transfixed in this moment, and I had remained standing. And that sob couldn't be fought back, and it flowed out of her eyes and the tears popped out. And she looked around and she locked eyes with me, the only bonehead that was still standing up, just staring. And she ran towards me and threw her arms around my neck, and she wept. And I wept. And in that moment, with time standing still, it became very clear what we needed to do next. We weren't just to offer her a bed, to offer her a place and a pillow where she could lay her head, but a home where her heart could rest. We weren't just to make her a boarder, but we were to offer her to become like one of our daughters, to make room in our hearts for one more family member. You know, we often jump out at the gates at life. We strive and we seek, and we often declare boldly to life what we're going to do and what we're going to achieve, instead of taking the time to stop and to breathe and to listen to what life or who life is inviting us to become. You know, there's that saying that when you find your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. What a load of crap, right? But here's the thing, when you find your passion, that comes with an invitation to live wholeheartedly. To live in such a way that you will make a difference when you've been captured by what it is you are meant to do. That little girl in that moment deserved no less than our whole heart. You know, when you live wholeheartedly, you will never feel more vulnerable or overwhelmed or inadequate for the task. But if you set yourself to it, the contribution you make to this world will never be more valuable. Thank you.